Greetings and salutations and welcome back to Ref the District. I'm Nathan Perry. That's the Stoner and that's Trev. The whole gang is back here on the show. I am in between my 2 weekends with my Three Little Pigs show that I am the wolf in. Hence the still wild hair that I got. It's going to get haircut there. We all do our what's called a pickup rehearsal tomorrow night, but show closes this weekend. Been a lot of fun, but I'm very excited to be back. And we've already got Locked on Law, JG and Doug in the house joining us. Of course, if you join us, you got to make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, make a comment, and also share it with your friends so they can join us here live every Wednesday here on YouTube and Facebook at 7:30 Eastern. We talk Washington Commanders, sprinkle a little bit of DC sports in when we can, just a little bit, just because mostly you are here for the Commanders content. And we've got plenty to talk about today. Of course, we're going to start off with the Deebo Samuel talk. So make sure you keep those thoughts ready in the comment section for that. Later on, we're going to be talking about free agency as a whole. Who should Washington be looking at? Look at the top list. And Stoner has promised us that he's got some serious hot takes for us there. And they're going to be winding down the combine and taking a look at who the star studs were. Who did Washington communicate with? Who should we keep an eye out for on draft day? Because the playbook's open. I'll say that. We'll tease that. We'll move on from there. But we are brought to you by Bet Online. Go ahead and hand over to Bet Online and get yourself started on your betting adventure from the world's most trusted betting online source. Whether or not it is NFL action when we're back in play, maybe they'll have a few special free agent prop bets for you. Of course, you can also bet on NBA, NHL, and baseball coming up right around the corner. Don't forget golf and UFC as well. That's Bet Online, where the game starts here. Gentlemen.
Yes.
A bit of a surprise over the weekend as a 5th round pick in 2025 was dealt to the San Francisco 49ers, who are trying to pay one Brock Purdy and need to shove away some of this excess space and make room for that paycheck. And they dealt us one Deebo Samuel, former All-Pro, wide receiver that's very well known amongst NFL fandoms as a guy who is a game changer here in Washington. Maybe Adam Peters might say that he is a commander. Remember the fabled commander label that they used last year on the draft. Trev, I'm going to start with you here because I know you initially, you didn't like this trade. You weren't a fan when Deebo was kind of tenuously listed as Washington wanting Adam Peters and Washington wanting Deebo Samuel. You said no.
I did. In the group chat, I said no at first because it just felt like his injury history was a huge factor in my decision of saying no, I didn't like it. But then I did some extensive research, so I was like, let me just see and not use it as a hot take, really. And the past 2 or 3 seasons, he's played 15 games out of 17/18 games, so he's pretty much played the whole season. I can live with him missing three games a year. That's cool. So then I went on from there. Then I went back with some tape from this past year. He didn't have a very good year, I guess, in his eyes, but he was still productive. He still was probably the best player on the offensive side of the ball outside of Christian McCaffrey when he was healthy, and the other running back 24, Jordan Mason, something like that, and Brock Purdy, of course. But yeah, now I'm like a fan because he is a true slot receiver. We don't have to experiment anymore with wide receivers for what he's going to bring, which is the screen game, the out of the backfield game, the yak game, and the pass blocking game. Shout out to Diami for holding that spot down, but he's not really that much of a pass blocker or a run blocker. But he started to develop a screen game that we use thanks to Kliff and Jayden Daniels. That helps a lot too, and of course offensive line. But now we have Deebo Samuel where we don't have to try and see if it works this way. We just stick him up under there. We got Terry on the outside, Deebo in the slot / backfield. Now we need somebody else, and we'll get to that later on the show. But I'm a fan. It makes us better. We got better after this trade. And some people were surprised by a 5th-round pick. Reports came out that San Francisco running a 6th round or something like that, a pick, or a 4th round, something like that. I don't know. A 4th round, and we gave him a 5th. So I think that's pretty much fair. It's Deebo Samuel. He's not the Deebo Samuel when he was number 19 back when 49ers were making NFC championship runs all the time, but he still is Deebo Samuel, somebody that defenses, other teams have to game plan for at least a little bit, more than De'Ami Brown, so to speak, in that role. So cool. I'm cool with the trade. We got better.
Yeah, I mean, this is a battled, hardened Deebo Samuel. Went to a Super Bowl with San Francisco, went to a couple NFC championship games there. Interesting to me, Stoner, before we talk more about the positive sides of why Deebo Samuel should succeed here in Washington. Interesting to me that he actually wanted out. And we mentioned there San Francisco having to do their due diligence to kind of free up some room because they're going to be paying Brock Purdy. Now, part of this deal, they wanted a 4th round pick. They also wanted to, shave off some of that salary. They ended up taking the salary. Washington really getting away with kind of a 1-year rental here if they wanted to do that. So why did Deebo want out of a good team, a team that legitimately has been, kind of top of the NFC pile for a while, but they had a down year thanks to a bunch of injuries, to include Deebo Samuel kind of fighting through pneumonia the entire year? Why would he want out?
That's a good question, but I go back to my old friend, Mr. Ron Rivera, when asked a question very similar: quarterback. That's probably, I'm probably hyping it up a little bit in terms of, Brock Purdy's not terrible, but he's not Jayden Daniels. And now he didn't orchestrate the trade to Washington to play with Jayden Daniels, but I just think he needed something new. He demanded a trade a couple of years ago. Yeah. And then you kind of chalk that up to a whole contract negotiating tactic, and he ended up getting that big contract. But I think he was just kind of tired of it. He saw the writing on the wall. If you look at San Francisco right now, and they're going to give Brock Purdy $50 million a year. That's just the going rate for a quarterback nowadays, right? But you got Christian McCaffrey, who's he's incredible player. He's an MVP type player, but he's always hurt. Kittle is north of 30. Right. Brandon Ayuk's coming off of an ACL. Give me some other guys there. Trent Williams, 36, 37 years old.
He's up there. Point. Still probably one of the best offensive tackles, but sure, Father Time is undefeated, as they like to say. Only a matter of time before even Trent Williams play. You
got guys on the other side of the ball. You got Hargrave. He was released today, right? Yeah. Guys like Fuanga, right? Yeah. He's a free agent. Ward is a free agent. I think he just saw the writing on the wall is that they're going to give $50 million to Brock Purdy, and he says, "Well, where's my money going to come from after this season?" Because you can't. You re-upped McCaffrey. You just gave Ayuk the big deal last year, and he just said, "There's no place for me future, so I want to go someplace where I'm going to have a chance to get a contract extension, or at least somewhere where I'm going to have a chance to show that I deserve a contract extension next year." Because look, San Francisco is not, it's not your little brother's team or your uncle's team, whatever the cliche is, in terms of they were coming up. They went to the Super Bowl. They were getting there. I think they're on their way down at this point. And paying Brock Purdy is really going to hurt them. Yeah. Although you have to do it, but it's going to hurt them. So
I'm not so secretly a Purdy hater. So having seen him a lot at Iowa State, I'm just surprised that he was anywhere near as good as he has been in the league. That being said, he has been good, but I do feel like he's one of those quarterbacks who are so good that you have to pay, but not so good that they're going to end up taking you places. And that's that. I mean, I know that he took them to a Super Bowl, but that's just a stacked team. Yeah, I think that was a great defensive team they had in San Francisco. That was a great running team that they had in San Francisco. And Brock Purdy didn't necessarily need to be special. And I think that's where they're going to end up kind of regretting that. So I can see that there for you. And of course, a lot of people, Trev, mentioning kind of the thing that you're talking about, where He was a gadget player, and he was just used all over. So kind of looking at those stats, he was, as far as the skill players concerned, he was essentially running back 4, running the ball 42 times for 136 yards behind Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerrero, and Christian McCaffrey, all in there.
And let's be fair, Nathan, he would have been running back 2, but the only reason those other 2 guys are ahead of him is because McCaffrey was hurt.
I was going to say, yeah.
And then you had the next guy. And
everybody was hurt.
And then he got hurt, right? And then you had so he really was their running back 2.
Yeah. And as far as targets were concerned, and this is going to be the thing I'm going to pitch to you, Trev, as concerned, he was their 3rd highest targets. Juwan Jennings, George Kittle, then Deebo Samuel, 81 targets on the year. He caught 51 of those. A lot of people I've seen, Trev, talking about that. So he was, one of their top rushing options. He was one of their top wide receiver options. Where does he fit here for Washington? Is he wide receiver 2? Because a lot of the fan talk is Washington still needs to find wide receiver 2, because that is not going to be from Deebo Samuel.
Currently, he is wide receiver 2, literally, because before that, we just had Terry and Luke McCaffrey. So now he is literally wide receiver 2. Like you said, and I'm with that crowd too. I still think we need to go get somebody else a little bit higher caliber. We'll get to that later. But I think he's going to be a high targeted priority player for us this season too as well. Like you said, it's a prove year for him. It's a contract year for him to see if he wants to play here longer or go somewhere else and get a contract he likes. And he's already going to work. We saw highlights of him putting in work right now because there's talk to him about his weight and everything. I don't care, but I don't know about 81 targets. Maybe they'll trim down to 61 targets, but Jayden Daniels is going to find him and find him often. That's another security blanket, so to speak, for Jayden Daniels. And I think he got so many targets in San Francisco because Brandon Ayuk was down. Juwan Jennings was, I guess, number 2 wide receiver for them. Who else? And then him, and then Kittle, and then him. Mm-hmm. So he really has no other option. But for here, right now, he will be option 2. Literally as of today, but until we get the other receiver, yes, he's wide receiver 2.
Yeah, but he's definitely not wide receiver. Like you said, Trev, you said he's not wide receiver 2. He's not.
No, he's wide receiver. He's a slot guy. 1, 2, 3.
He's a slot guy.
1, 2, 3.
Definitely.
He can do outside, but
yeah, but he's shown lately in the last 2 years that he doesn't have the outside speed that he had at the beginning of his career. He just doesn't have it anymore. The injuries have taken a toll on him to an extent. He's still a game breaker. He's still a guy you got to deal with, but he's not the take the cover off the take the top off the cover, take the cover off the top, whatever the phrase is.
Cover off the top there.
Yeah. He's not that guy anymore. He's just not. And so they are going to need that third guy to be able to do it. And whether you want to call him wide receiver 2, we always have this conversation, who's 2 and who's 3. Doesn't really matter, but you do have to have a wide receiver 1, 2, and 3. And right now they've only got 2 of them.
Well, they do have Luke McCaffrey out there, and it'll be
wide receiver 4.
He fits in as far as the thing is. And I do think it's important, Stoner, that Washington have a wide receiver 2, because we talked about how Terry McLaurin needs somebody to take that pressure off of him. Yes. And all year he didn't. And you can tell the games where the coverage was dictated to take away Terry McLaurin, how those games were difficult for Washington to do anything. And it was only because Washington was lucky to have somebody step up. So you will need somebody to take that wide receiver 2 mantle. Now you're talking about Deebo Samuel being a gadget player, and we're talking about Terry McLaurin. The question was posed, is Deebo Samuel the best wide receiver that Terry McLaurin has played opposite? Is this going to be such an improvement? Now, someone else mentioned is talking about gadget players. We had a lot of hope for one Curtis Samuel, who was supposed to be used kind of all over the field. Didn't quite work out that way for Washington during his time in Washington. But is Deebo Samuel the best wide receiver Terry McLaurin has played alongside in the burgundy and gold?
I have to say he is. I think Curtis Samuel is the only other guy who can kind of fit into the category of somebody who puts up really good numbers, which he did for a couple of years. But yeah, I think that's it. I don't think
Yeah,
Terry's ever played.
think.
Maybe Cam Sims. Everybody loved Cam Sims.
Yeah,
so much love for Cam Sims.
Yeah, but yeah, I think he probably is the best receiver potentially. We'll have to see what happens, right? But I mean, there's always risk in these guys, right? There's always risk with these kind of players or any player. I was kind of pondering this today. Name me a player, a free agent who signed with any team. I don't care. In the last year or two, a free agent player or someone who was acquired in a trade that didn't have questions, that didn't have risks involved. Give me one. Just kind of think of last year, some of the bigger names. Saquon Barkley, right, was a free agent. The Giants didn't re-sign him. Why? Because maybe they thought he was probably too much money in the years of the running back being less emphasized in people's offenses, plus his injury history. He was coming off an injury the year before, so they decided not. But that worked out for Philly. That was a risk for Philly. It was a risk for Baltimore to sign Derrick Henry, who's north of 30 years old and led the league in carries for like 6 years in a row or something. He'd just been beat up, but it worked out for him.
Yep.
Every guy has risk, and then some don't work out. Houston went out and got Stephon Diggs. Everybody said that's going to put them over the top.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They're going for it. Stephon Diggs, right? Yep. There's risk there, right? And he gets hurt.
Yeah. Aaron Rodgers
and Devontae Adams and Hassan Reddick and Tyron Smith, all those guys that signed with the Jets, they all had question marks. Some work, some don't.
Yeah.
But there's never, especially in the NFL, there's never a guy that doesn't have risk. And you just have to weigh those risks and see, shake it out, see what happens. And that's the case in Deebo. The only risk is what? The only risk for him is what the cost is against this year's salary cap.
It's nothing.
I mean, it's a fair amount. $17.5 million is a fair amount, right? I mean, think about what
it eats up. It eats up just about a fifth of the available space.
Yeah,
so far,
it's a fair, and they're going to get more space when they trade John Allen or John Allen.
Yeah.
When they redo Terry's contract, and they will redo his contract, that'll free up some space. But still, it's a good chunk. Look at him and Lattimore take up $35 million in salary cap space. So there's that risk there.
Sure.
But it's a 1-year risk for a 5th-round draft pick, i.e. Dominique Hampton.
You don't even have Dominique Hampton actually could potentially still be something. You could name half a dozen of our 5th-round picks over the last 4 or 5 years that aren't still on the roster, right? Go ahead. Name any of our 5th-round picks from
that are not still on the roster
to 2020 that just name any of them. Go ahead.
That are not still on the roster?
No, just name any of our 5th-round picks from 2020.
John Bates, I think, was
2024.
Well, it wasn't John Bates, maybe Derek Forrest, Percy Butler.
Percy Butler was a 4.
He was a 4. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think Forrest was a
4
5th.
as well. Forrest, I think might be in a 5th, could have been a 6th.
Yeah.
But yes, my point is, and as your point is with Dominique Hampton, is the player that we know Deebo Samuel can be. Right, compared to what a 5th-round pick is, you're getting money.
Sam Howell was a 5th.
Oh yeah, Sam Howell was a 5th. Cole Turner, wasn't he a 5th?
Cole Turner, I think, was a 5th. Yeah.
Keith Ismail, Khaleke Hudson.
Yeah,
Oof.
Yeah, exactly.
So KJ Henry.
That's the risk you're taking. Guys like that for what Deebo can be potentially for this team.
We got better.
And you did. You absolutely got better with very minimal risk.
Yeah.
If you're worried about the $17.5 million that he takes up in cap space, then talk to me at the beginning of the season. And if somebody came out and said, well, they couldn't get so-and-so, fill in the blank, they couldn't get Brandon Ayuk in a trade or whatever because they didn't have money because Deebo took up too much cap space. It's not going to happen. It's not that significant against the cap. So there's no downside to this move. No downside whatsoever to this move.
I like it.
A 5th round pick. And if it doesn't work out, it's 1 year.
Yep.
And you start over next year trying to find that wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3.
Adam Peters doing some smart things with the roster when it comes to that. He does have to fill up an entire roster, but Mike H has this question before we get to that roster. Mike H asking question, is Deebo 100% locked down, signed with us? I heard a report that the actual signing won't happen until after the football year, and another team could swoop in. This is accurate, Mike, in the sense that the deal is not official until the league year starts, which I believe is Wednesday of next week. Open tampering, legal tampering, as they call it, can start Monday. But the official deals don't get signed until Wednesday at like 4:00 or something like that. Now, so another team could potentially swoop in and change things. It's unlikely at this point because a lot of that stuff has already happened, but it's not unheard of. Even here in Washington, we've seen it where a player went to go sign elsewhere and then came back. J.D. McKissick is, of course, the player I'm mentioning who signed a deal on paper or in air rather, and it wasn't written in blood. He came back to Washington after reports said, hey, Washington was going to pay him the same thing. He went back, worked.
And that's free agency. And I think Washington took a little heat for that, right? To still negotiate with a guy who had agreed but not signed a contract. But when it comes to trades like that, trades don't get kind of redone, or they don't renegotiate a trade with another team if they can find something better. You would get run out of the league if you're San Francisco, who then says, actually, we decided to trade him to Pittsburgh for a 4th rounder. No, that's just not how it works.
All the deal again, all the negotiating has already been done. Really,
it just doesn't become official until next Wednesday at 4:00. And plus, he does still have to pass a physical.
That is the other aspect to it. He does technically have to pass the physical. Likely going to happen, especially if you watched that video. Now, the big question is, who is also going to join Deebo Samuels in burgundy and gold this year? Lots of roster space to fill up, and we have some of those answers coming up for you right here in the game. Stick with us. Welcome to the game here on episode 215 of Ref the District. It's free agency. 1 week away, though. Legal tampering does start earlier than that. One of the most fun things in the world. We know that it's illegal to tamper with players, but we're going to just say that you already do it, so we're going to call it legal. That's going to happen early next week. You're going to start seeing some names fly off the board as you're already seeing players being signed by the teams that they're currently under. So that's where you can make deals right now. Next week is going to be more about those players who were on another team, like Devontae Adams here in our image, who Washington could potentially sign. So I've been big on the no big names coming to Washington, namely because I've been part of the no big spending either.
Are you already been canceled on that because of the Deebo move?
No,
you're still good.
That was a trade. That was a 5th round pick. That's different.
All right, so you're gonna stay on a technicality. I like it. The technicality is you said free agency, no big names. Okay.
So my question for you, gents, do you expect a big name to be signed by Washington in the free agency? And by big name, I mean not just a former Pro Bowler, because we had a couple big names, Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner, who came to Washington last year. Even Jeremy Chin could potentially fill into that spot. But as far as getting a big paycheck, no one really fit that bill. Does that change here in Adam Peters, Dan Quinn year 2? Do they go after somebody who is a big name? Marshawn Lattimore traded for in the middle of the season. I mean, those guys who are making 18 plus million, are we going to get one of those guys?
Yeah, I do believe so, guys. And the reason why is because we're winning. Is because we're on the way up. is because we're now signing guys who are big names who now know other big names. Like, yo, come with me and play here. We are a sexy attraction now in the NFL, you guys, and 90% of that is Jayden Daniels. And that's no credit, that's no disrespect to Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, Kliff Kingsbury, and Josh Harris. Those were the catalysts. But as far as players go, because they want to win, Jayden Daniels is the reason. So I do believe we will have one or two more big names coming. I don't think we're going to go crazy. We'll still be aggressive. But I think the holes that we fill will have some more sexier names this year than we had this past year. To be honest, because I just find it hard to see Adam Peters saying no to a big name that literally wants to come here under any, regardless of no matter contract, no matter what. He just wants to win. He wants to be a better part of a better locker room, a part of a better community, a change, a positive change, and where he can come where he doesn't have to look over his shoulder every day to see, the ownership is going to have something to do with his job or not. So, yeah, I think some more sexy big names are coming. Like I said, less than 5, no more than 3 is what I predict, because he's still gonna be smart and aggressive and still wants to find those dogs like Frankie Louvu's and Nick Allegretti's and the 1-year, 2-year guys. But yeah, my overall answer is more big names are coming.
How do you classify big names in just what we're talking about? Kind of what Nathan was saying, like not just big names,
right?
Like Nathan said, Zach Ertz is a big name. Bobby Wagner's a big name, but they're not big names, big contracts.
No.
So are we talking about big name, big contract, or are we just talking about big name?
Maybe one big name, big contract on the defensive side of the ball, I think, honestly. But other than that,
like if they signed Charvarius Ward from San Fran to a 5-year, $78 million deal with 56 guaranteed or whatever.
Something like that. Yeah, Charvarius Ward, guys who still got it but want to go to a contender and are deserved of a 18+ contract. I think one of those will happen
in their prime too, right? I mean, I feel like that has to be right. We're not talking about a big name who's 31, 32.
That's what I was going to say.
We're talking about a 28-year-old who's going to hit their stride.
But see, here's what I'm getting to that. As far as wide receiver, Ari Mayro for my sports update, part of the 33rd team. Now we had him on our show. He dropped a list of free agent wide receivers so far this offseason. And I do see us getting a sexy name from these lists from guys who are in their 30s, who are looking to contend and go out, finish their career on a winning front rather than being remembered in Cleveland all their life or the Jets all their life. So some of these names you could get for the low and still have something left in the tank and will probably play better because of the quarterback. Think about it. Some of these receivers are good, but you couldn't tell because of who they played with at the quarterback position before. So we got Devontae Adams to start off, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Hollywood Brown, Darius Slayton, DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Williams, Van Jefferson, Robert Woods, Tyler Boyd. He was part of the three-headed monster in Cincinnati. He's kind of drifted off, but he's still got some. Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He had a good year in New Orleans. He's a deep threat guy like Tim Patrick. So there's still some guys out there who could be in the vet minimum range, still have enough left in the tank to be a contender. And also Jayden Daniels can really bring out the best of them because what did he do to Zach Ertz? Everybody was like, oh, Zach Ertz is a sexy name, but that dude's old. Didn't he just come off the practice squad because of injuries? And look what Zach did. Almost double-digit touchdowns.
But also, Trev, you have to add those guys who just today who requested a trade.
So
they're not free agents, and those are
DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf for existence. That would be a sweet wide receiver too. Terry, you got your big, tall target on the other
wide
side.
Receiver 1, by the way.
Well, but he'd be on the outside with Terry, and then Deebo in the slot, and Luke on the bench to come off the bench or whatever. That would be sweet. But yeah. So it's going to be crazy, but I do think a big name is going to come via free agency. Since DK Metcalf's a trade, so I won't include him. But free agency, yes, there's going to be one over almost $20 million a year big name that we sign.
I don't know. I don't think I'm with that. Personally, I don't think.
But what if somebody wants to come play for us and is cool with that? You're going to think Adam's going to be like, no? And he fits what we're looking for.
I don't think it works like that, to be honest. I don't think guys call here looking to take less money to come onto your team. I don't think it works that way.
You never know.
I don't think almost any guy will take less money to come play in Washington unless.
You think Bobby Wagner did that?
Right. Unless you're at the very end of your career. And I don't know that they necessarily, I don't know that Bobby Wagner took less money to come to Washington.
Maybe they offered him that.
But you're right, Trev. In that case, like Bobby Wagner is calling Washington and saying, hey, Dan Quinn, I want to play for you in maybe my last year or maybe my last 2 years. Mm-hmm. Or Zach Ertz calling Kliff and saying, Kliff, I want to come play for you in my last year or whatever. And they're not necessarily shopping around. Mm-hmm. But I promise you, if somebody offered Bobby Wagner 2 years and $14 million, he would have taken that over the 1 year $5 in Washington. No. Yeah, he definitely would have. 100%.
You mean to tell me if Tennessee Titans came to him and offered him that, he would have gone there for real?
100%. 2 years, double the money, basically, than what he was getting here? Yeah. He's definitely going to do that.
No, he wouldn't. He wants to win. He's not about money on the contract.
I don't know. I think so. But here's a hot take for you, Nathan. Here's one of my hot takes that I want for you.
It's time to wake up.
Jayden Daniels, right? We love Jayden Daniels. He's everything. Thank God we're not looking at who the quarterbacks are.
Yeah, it's right? So fantastic.
What did we used
to have to look at the quarterback list?
What was that game? That video we also was it quarterback roulette or what?
Yeah, we did the quarterback roulette a couple of years ago.
What was that game though that we did? That what is that? Well, the whammy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no whammies, no whammies, no whammies.
Right.
Someone's going to sign Sam Darnold to a not insignificant contract, and they're going to have Sam Darnold as their quarterback in 2025. Couldn't be us.
Yeah,
couldn't be us.
We'd be debating Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones and Russell Wilson,
Cam Ward, and all these other guys
looking it up
there.
Thank God we're out of that business.
I heard he was disrespectful.
But here's what I'm saying. I think I think Jayden Daniels has completely taken Adam Peters' plan and thrown it in the trash. And here's why. Because his plan was, he said it from the very beginning. Adam Peters says, we're going to build this team through the draft. Mm-hmm. Right? And they did the first year. Right. They built, they had a bunch of picks. They even moved back in the second round and got an extra pick there. And they had, 6 guys in the top 100? I believe Luke was exactly number 100.
Yep.
I think he was the 6th guy, right? And then all of a sudden, Jayden Daniels was way better than they expected. Now, they thought he could be good and he could be a franchise quarterback, but not in year 1.
So now, I see where you're going with this.
So now, okay, you get towards the end of the year. Okay, now let's go get a shutdown corner and give up 2 draft picks for him.
Well, you get one in return, sure.
You did get one later. You gave up a 3rd and a 4th for a 5th, right? So let's do that, and let's go get Deebo in the offseason and get rid of a 5th. The one you got from New Orleans, right? So now all you've got coming up right now, all you've got is a 1, 2, and a 3 that is going to help this team. Because after that, you got 6, 7, 7. Mm-hmm. And that 6 being the last pick of the 6th round, or not the last pick, the 29th pick of the 6th round. And then after you add in a bunch of compensatory picks that are going to come slide in late, you're talking about 160th player. Or worse. So he has, I think he's just said, you know what? This team's window is earlier than we expected. And we're going to have to go and get a Deebo Samuel. And we're going to have to go get I don't know who that next guy is, but you got 3 picks. You can't build a draft. You can't build an organization through the draft.
That's what I'm saying. See, that's literally what I'm like, a pathway to what I was just saying.
Yeah.
A big name will come. Somebody's coming here. That's going to be
right.
Yo.
That might happen, Trev, because I think they're going all in. And I don't think Deebo is necessarily that sort of.
Wait, are we talking Jerry
definitely
Jones all in, or are we talking actually all in?
We're talking Houston Texans all in.
He's just a puzzle piece now. You need
We're
a
talking
Deebo.
Go get Joe Mixon. Go get Stephon Diggs. I'm talking about what Houston did last year.
Houston, sure, yeah.
They said we're going all in.
And then defense, they went and got Daniil Hunter from the Vikings, Grenard from the Vikings. Like they got their defense stinging.
And I think that's what I see is happening here. Now, for sure, it's way early. It's way, way, way early in this whole process.
Yeah.
We haven't even gotten to free agency, and we hadn't even gotten to the draft yet.
Right.
But if you go into this with 3 draft picks, and even if you're able to trade back
3 in the first 2 days,
3 preferred picks.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I don't care about 6, 7, 7. Those guys, they don't
just want to make sure we're clarifying it for anybody.
Not 3 total picks.
Washington does have more than 3 picks. But they only have 3 in the first 2 days.
They have like 29, 58, and 70 something. I think it's right at 80.
That's all you need.
I think that's what the 3 are. Those guys are going to help you, but that's this team right now, the way they've been acting ever since, oh my gosh, Jayden Daniels is it. He's the guy. He's the man. He's better than we thought. They've been acting a little bit different. They've been giving away their draft picks, trading away for, don't kill the messenger here, for guys who are at the end of their prime. Marshawn Lattimore is going to be 29 years old. Hasn't had a dominant season in a couple of years. Deebo Samuel is 29 years old. Hasn't had a dominant season for a couple of years.
2021, yeah.
Right? So these are guys who they're not expensive.
No, that's why,
right?
That's good.
But they cost you draft picks.
Yeah, and
they
have
you a
injury
third,
questions
fourth, and a
for
fifth.
sure.
They have injury questions. They have maybe attitude-ish issues. So I'm just saying that it looks like they have changed their philosophy in what they said they were going to do, Adam Peters said at the very beginning. And that should be concerning if you're a build through the draft kind of guy.
So I do have a counter argument to this because I don't necessarily think that things have changed. I did like, by the way, Locked On Law had this earlier about the expectations that you said that Adam Peters and Jayden Daniels had together. Locked On Law saying maybe not better than they expected, but faster than they expected. 100% they expected him to be a franchise quarterback, as Stoner had mentioned, but I don't think anybody anticipated making it to the NFC Championship game, being 1 game away from the Super Bowl in year 1 with a bunch of rentals on free agency and only 1 year of building through the draft. One of the other things I like here is Angela with a $2 super donation. We appreciate you, Angela. Also agreeing with us. It's so nice to be in the offseason and not need a QB. Washington's going to have to pick up likely 1 veteran QB unless they go into the season with Sam Hartman, Heartbreaker, as QB2. I expect them to kind of fill in some theirs. Marcus Mariota is on there, but it is great not needing to talk about any of these guys as QB1 because we got that covered. Angela, appreciate you again.
Can I add to that, by the way?
Sure.
Just real quick, just a real short thing is that also remember that this team still has 20 some odd, 25, 26 open roster spots that they got to fill. You get 3 from the draft. Okay, 6. You get 6 from the draft. All the rest of them have to come from free agency, of course, unless you trade back into the draft. But that's not building through the draft, Trev. That's not building through the draft.
I saw somebody comment on the side. Isn't the first 3 rounds building through the draft and the rest is just like what forever? Like
yes,
forever?
But last year they had 6 players in
that's
the first
fine.
3 rounds.
That's cool. So
that's an anomaly. That's going to be.
So that's cool. That means these 3 can come help the 6 that we just took. And let's be honest, How many of those 6 really, really contributed for us last year? How many for real did? 2. 2.
2?
Maybe 3.
Maybe 4. Maybe
4.
5. 5 of the 6.
Ben Sinnott really didn't.
You're right. He's got a ways to go, but he's also being counted on in the future. It's not like he's a guy that is a bust.
So we have some left over from last year that can pair with these 3 from this year and go with that, and then re-sign some more players and go get some free agency players. We'll be fine. There it is. Yeah, Jersey Slim said that.
Jersey here.
Yeah,
with that
but they had 6 last year.
Okay, well, you know what? Last year I had more money than I made this year in taxes, but this year I got less money. It's
okay.
Life. It just
Did you say last year that you were going to make more in taxes or pay less in taxes this coming year?
I thought I was going to.
All right. And if you didn't, did you say, well, I stuck to my plan? No, you didn't. You failed your plan.
It wasn't under my control, though.
It is.
I think we're getting a little carried away here too, gents.
Because it is under their control. I'm just saying, Nathan, that this team is supposed to be building through the draft, and right now they're not doing that.
It doesn't necessarily mean this year's. It just means the draft in total. Yeah. I think like
they're talking long-term plans, right? Trev is right on the money here. Building through the draft, this is their second draft. What are you putting on them? They only have as you mentioned, Stoner, they have 9 current picks that they've had within the first 2 days of the draft. 6 last year, 3 currently this year. What do you want them to do? Do you want them to trade back, get more in the first 2 days? Like what?
I'll tell you.
Because here's my point to this. Is the long-term plan is to build through the draft. Appreciate you, Jersey, for the comment on the first 3 rounds that got Trev kicked off there. The long-term plans is their key players need to come through the draft. That is what Adam Peters is talking about in building through the draft. Is when we go to re-sign guys or when we go to pay some player a big contract, that player, the desire is that player is homegrown, that we're not shopping around free agency, that free agency is to fill some holes that then you can allow to draft guys that are the best player available. And Doug hit that earlier. I love this mentality. Use the free agency to, you have a missing gap somewhere. This is where free agency is. Now, you might not get the guy. It might be a guy who's on a 1-year prove-it deal. It might be on a guy who's on a 3-year cheap deal that you're just like, this fills this hole and allows us to draft best player available. That is Adam Peters' plan, is when he gets to draft a player at 29, potentially this year, meaning it's going to be a very long night for us here on Ref the District as we stream live the first round of the draft. First time in a long time, boys, and I'm going to enjoy every minute of it. But anyways, we get to pick 29 and he trades it away and makes the entire night worthless for us. Like, is that what you want? Or is it what you want is him taking literally the best player available at that spot, not filling a need, taking the best player that he put that commander labeled tag on and taking? What is it that you want him to do to build through the draft?
I will tell you exactly what. I don't want you to trade away draft picks for guys who are only going to be here for 1 or maybe 2 years. That's what I want. I don't want them trading away the future potential stars, building blocks of this team for aging veterans. That's what I don't want to see. And that's what's happening right now. Again, they have 26 spots that need to be filled. And you're only going to fill 3 of them with draft picks. Or let's just say 6. Let's say the 6th and the 2 7th rounders stay on, make the team as well, like they did last year. That means 20 free agents have to come into this team and fill a role that is not done through the draft. And maybe that's a Christian Kirk, or maybe that's a DK Metcalf, or whatever. Maybe it's one of those guys, but that's not a guy you got through the draft. So that's what I want them to do, is to stop trading away draft picks for aging veterans.
So you don't like the 5th for Deebo Samuel. You don't like the 3rd for Marcus Lattimore.
I honestly, I don't like that in terms of the process of doing it. If Marshawn Lattimore can be a shutdown corner and you extend him, great.
So the deal is only successful is if the player gets extended here in Washington.
Yeah, to a point. Because look, I'm not trying to say I'm negative on these moves overall. I'm just saying that we are no longer building through the draft at this point. They're not doing that right now, because you still have to replace. Think of all the guys that got replaced last year on offense and defense on 1-year deals, and all the guys are going to have to be replaced again this year, and they're going to have to be replaced with veterans, not with rookies. You're not getting rookies who are going to start when they're a 6th and 7th rounder. You still have to get wide receiver 2. You still have to get a tight end.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to get a left guard or left tackle, a right tackle when they release Wiley. You still got to replace Sam Cosmi for the year. You got to replace John Allen and Dante Fowler. And you got to replace,
if they don't resign,
Jeremy Chin and whoever CB3 is going to be. You got to replace all these guys.
Yeah, there are a lot of spots.
Do it all through the draft.
No, and
you got 3. You got 3.
Again, what they're talking about is why are we on the draft, guys? It's free agency. Let's
it relates to the free agency, Nathan. It relates to it. So with all the guys they're going to have to sign.
Yes, they have 20 plus spots. We know that most of those spots have to be filled with free agent players. So let's start filling in some of these spots here. Now, we know that this draft has a deep wide receiver class. It has a deep running back class. Maybe you get those guys there. There's also a deep defensive line. You're planning on giving away Jonathan Allen. So where is it in free agency that Washington should be focused? Where should Adam Peters focus during free agency, Trev? We'll get to some players' names, especially as I've seen a few out here in the comment section. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you comment with who you think Washington should get there, and answer this question for me. Where should Adam Peters focus in free agency? They've got 20 plus spots to fill, as Stoner's bringing up.
Defensive line, safety, cornerback, wide receiver, offensive line, and maybe even linebacker.
I mean, the whole team.
I mean,
really, there's a lot of holes.
Because you mentioned 3 classes being deep in the draft, and I just don't, and it's not our fault that we went to the NFC Championship last year, but now we are a winning culture. We are a winning team. And like you said, I think Adam Peters wants to win now along with DQ. So if we do draft a wide receiver, are they going to be wide receiver 2? Probably not. Luther Burden, no offense. That's cool. But are you going to be wide receiver 2? Let's be honest. Not really. Probably not. Defensive line, don't really know prospects about that. Running backs probably our best we could do to replace B-Rob if we need to, or to pair with Austin Eckler. You got Genty, you got Ollie Gordon kid, you got Trevion Henderson from Ohio State, you got some more, so it's deep there. But as far as free agency, so if you want the win now mode and you get your good guys to fill the holes that are much needed for this team, defensive line, safety, wide receiver room. Go ahead and get that, and go ahead and get your big names and your guys right there and get it started. That way, when the draft comes around, you can afford to have 3 day 1 and 2 picks, and it won't bother you as much because what you did in free agency. So, wide receiver, defensive line, and safety / quarterback.
Stoner, are you going to agree with that?
He could have said, Trevor could have said any position group, and I would have agreed with it.
Really, I think you have to address each position group with a free agent, literally.
So guys, I get that there's all these holes. I've been touting it since the beginning. I didn't call them frauds like Stoner, but I did say that this team is overachieving and that there's a lot and that's one of the great things about this. And we've talked about this as well. This last year was supposed to be Jayden Daniels' worst team.
Yeah.
Right. But that's actually not necessarily true.
You're right.
That could have been lightning in a bottle in 2024. Right. So how do they continue looking? So they have all these holes to fill, but where do they focus? Drew and Yam and Jersey all going offensive line here for us, which is where I would honestly focus my efforts in the trenches. You guys know that my second biggest position in football, obviously first is QB, is the guy getting after the QB. We don't have one of those here in Washington. No. So you need to get one. If you can't get one in free agency, you better find one in the draft. So if free agency is used to fill the hole, is there a free agent rusher that you guys like that potentially Washington could sneak in and score?
The ones that I guess were out there have already been re-signed by their former teams, I think, or franchise tag maybe. I don't even know. I don't know who's available outside the wide receiver list that already put out.
I'm going to give you the names from NFL.com as they come up on their list of top 100, and they list them by their positions. Edge rushers. Okay. Josh Sweat.
Nice.
Hassan Reddick. Nice. Khalil Mack. Malcolm Kuntz. Deo, 25-year-old from the Colts. I'm not even going to try to get his last name here. Chase Young.
Oh.
Azeez Ojulari. DeMarcus Lawrence. Like those are your names that are out there in the top 10 edge rushers.
So
Any of
far,
those excite
right?
you guys? Yeah, I mean,
no, those are all like prove it year guys. Or
there are no difference makers on there for me.
No
difference makers.
I forgot half the list you said already.
yeah.
It's. I mean, Josh Sweat is the number one overall free agent, I believe.
And I'm not really high on him just because he had a couple good games. He had a good Super Bowl. He was quiet all year long until Super Bowl. Now everybody's like, Josh Sweat. We've played Josh Sweat before when he was number 94, not 19, and he ain't do nothing to us. So.
Yeah.
Hassan Reddick, maybe because he'll be somewhere he wants to play, so he'll get back to what he was before he went to New York and, pretty much started them along, whatever. But other than that,
yeah, I think it's hard because you're talking about some guys who are older, who've only flashed every now and then or haven't flashed consistently. Khalil Mack is aging. You got Kuntz, who was a rising star. He's only 27, but he was injured last year. It's difficult to find. And then like someone like Chase Young, who's absolutely not coming back. Right. So it doesn't look like you're going to fill an edge rusher position there. So it's like, okay, you got the number one position filled. The number two, you're probably going to just get a bunch of, guys like Dante Fowler, who was a little bit lower on that list, who are just going to fill the role for you until you can draft your guy in free agency. So my big thing on free agency here is you have offense in a can. Okay. Jayden Daniels is the kind of quarterback who is going to make he made De'Ami Brown a lot of money in the playoffs. Now I know De'Ami had his fair share to do with that, but this is a quarterback who is going to take guys who probably don't deserve to get paid, and they're going to get paid because they were a target for Jayden Daniels. And the running backs are going to do well because they have Jayden Daniels as the quarterback. The offensive line probably going to do well because they have a guy called Jayden Daniels as a quarterback. So I don't think the focus should be on the offense. I think the focus needs to be on the defense. That was the one thing that kind of held this team back from a Super Bowl visit. So edge rushers are out. Where else do you guys go? Where do you, Stoner, do you find cornerback 3? You got, Lattimore and you got Mikey. So is that where you put your effort?
Yes.
Yeah, you got to find another outside guy.
Yeah, you have to find that other guy. And kind of jumping on the edge, you mentioned all those guys that, they're not difference makers. You had a guy who gave you 12 sacks last year, Dante Fowler. Not a difference maker, though. Also can't play against the run. Can't stop the run. So you don't need a guy who can give you Brian Arakpo type numbers. You need a guy who can also make a difference against the run and can really harass the quarterback completely.
Yes.
So you don't really, I don't like any of those guys in free agency. So that's where you go in terms of the draft, because the draft is deep at edge. And so you might even be able to trade back at 29 and still get a difference maker at edge.
Sure.
But after that, the very first thing you have to be looking for is cornerback. And you mentioned it, because this is a good cornerback free agent list. Although some of the guys are a little bit older, they're still in the prime of their career. And we're talking about Ward or the guy from Detroit,
Reed.
Carlton Davis.
Yeah, Carlton Davis.
DJ Reed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? These guys would fit really well in terms of coming into your team and being that guy as cornerback 2 or cornerback 3, however you want to label it, with Lattimore. I think that's got to be their very first focus is on corner. And they've got to get one of those. I don't know. Do you call those guys big names? Do you call DJ Reed a big name? Do you call Ward a big name?
I mean, we're sitting here naming them as big names.
Asante Samuel Jr. out there, Byron Murphy, who's a pretty good young talent as well.
So it's deep there, free agency. Cornerback is. And I think it's fairly deep in the draft as well, but this is where you can't address everything in the draft. You've already decided you got to go for edge in the draft. But, so maybe you can't go corner. That's where you got to focus free agency.
I think also free agency, you got to, if we're going to let John Allen go, we don't have all of our hopes and dreams built in Johnny Newton. You're going to have to go get a sexy name.
Newton's a beast.
I do too, but you know what I mean. You got to go get a sexy name if one becomes available in the defensive tackle spot, interior spot. That way, you can go get you a DJ Reed, a Byron Murphy, a tier 2/tier 3 cornerback that will be okay, because now you got your studs in defensive line that makes the secondary better with some not so top tier guys. So that's what I think you should focus on too, is after when you get your cornerback, see if you can find a really nice defensive tackle that's going to replace Jonathan Allen. Because no matter what we say, what we feel about him, he was a difference maker for us at some point in his career here. He was being game planned. I mean, he still was. He's like almost the most double teamed interior offensive lineman of the season. So whether in our eyes he wasn't that great, other teams saw he was great, and another team he's going to go to will think he's great because of the payday he'll get. So get you a nice stud, sexy name up front. That way you can go get you a less sexier name in the back end for linebackers and cornerbacks, and that way you can address free agency so aggressively, but not go crazy like Stoner's afraid that we could happen since we're on a different plan now. Oh no.
I'm all for Travarius Ward. He's a risk as well, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he's a stud, but he's
better than what we have.
and he was great. He was great up until you had that tragedy at home, and then last year he was not great, and it's understandable. But can you get that back? Probably. And are you going to give him $60 million guaranteed to do that, to get back to where he was?
If a team comes out there and says we want you, he's going to give that team his all. So
yeah, he's at an age too. I feel like he has to sign a longer term contract. He's not young enough. Like Jeremy Chin was young enough. He's turned 27 this year.
Yeah,
where he could afford a 1-year prove it deal to then parlay that into a longer, more lucrative contract. Ward, just looking over his stats here, he's 28.8 years old, meaning he's almost going to be 29, which means a 1-year prove it deal puts him north of 30. And not a lot of people are willing to pay 30-year-olds a lot of money, especially in a position that you need speed and stuff like that. So expect actually Ward, I think, to get a contract that is a little less than what you were thinking about, and maybe not a big name contract that we're talking about. Now, it does bring up something I wanted to talk about before we get to even more specific players, is how much does it play into free agency of who you know? We saw a little bit last year. Bobby Wagner coming because he knows Dan Quinn. Zach Ertz coming because he knows Kliff Kingsbury. Ward from San Francisco knows a few of those names. Deebo Samuel played with Anthony Lynn as well, or for Anthony Lynn there. How much does the who you know come into play? Should we be looking for former San Francisco players, former Dan Quinn players, former Kliff Kingsbury players, as a lot of people were loving Christian Kirk because he could potentially play in a system that he did well with in Arizona under Kliff Kingsbury?
Yes and no. Okay. If it's going to be like last year where we get Dante Fowler and Dorrance Armstrong from Dallas because of Dan Quinn.
And Biotish.
Yeah, and Biotish. I'm not including him because he was good. He was great. But the other two had great moments. Yeah, Fowler had double-digit sacks, but real quick, I remember him mostly for penalties against the quarterback than his sacks, and that's not good. Yeah, double digits. So if it's like that, I don't want it. But if it is like Deebo Samuels, whoever else knows AP, whoever else knows Dan Quinn that had, production and a name for themselves, quote unquote, NFL, yes, bring them on. Bring them on. It happened last year with the Panthers. We were the Commanders for a while, but all those guys were horrible, so it just translated to us being
Commanders. I forgot about
that. But yeah, so I think it does play an important role because Bobby Wagner, prime example. That's all you got to say. He could have went anywhere else, but he came to Washington, which I still can't believe, even after a year, because of Dan Quinn and because of the interview with AP and Josh Harris. So I think knowing somebody does come into factor for free agency.
I mean, it's an incestuous league. That's kind of how it works, right? You really go with guys that you know. Coaching staffs are the same way. You bring on guys that you know. You bring on players that you know that have played well for you in the past or have at least the mentality that you're looking for. Mostly. It's not every single guy. But how about this name for you that I've heard is possibly on the block? Trayvon Diggs in Dallas. There's rumors that he's going to be
mentioned that.
Yeah. He could be cut loose. Is that somebody?
No.
If they bring him in, though, obviously Joe Witt and Dan Quinn know him. So if they bring him in, they're going to be happy that they brought him.
We cooked them when they was with Joe Witt and Dan Quinn. I don't want him getting cooked with Joe Witt and Dan Quinn when he's playing for us.
All right.
Harry dogged him every day. No.
Don't we already have a guy?
Knees.
Isn't BSJ still got 1 year left?
No, he's done.
Get him out of here.
He's done. But you're right, Nathan. I think it is a lot of familiarity. But that can go a long way, right? Because you have these guys have been all over. When you talk about Kliff Kingsbury, you can talk about the 2 or 3 different places he's been in the NFL and guys he's coached with in college. And same with Quinn. Quinn has been in Seattle and he's been in Atlanta and he's been in Dallas. That's how they know these guys, and that's how they get these guys to come play on their team. So I think you're going to see that. And I think it's going to turn into, my personal opinion, I think their next move, or maybe their big move, and I don't know if this is considered a big move, I feel really good about saying that I think Christian Kirk is going to be a Washington Commander before the season starts. I think Christian Kirk's going to be the guy. And Christian Kirk's the guy I would love to have personally. How can you not like Christian Kirk?
Because we just got Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, very different player.
You need a wide receiver.
Very different.
I want a big wide receiver. I need a red zone target. I don't want us going down there and have to keep throwing 50-50s to Terry all the time, even though he's good at it. But I need somebody that we can just high point and go get. I mean, we need that.
I will say that Christian Kirk to me feels a lot like OZ, where kind of a smaller, agile type player, not necessarily a true wide receiver too. Now, Christian Kirk did have several good years, especially in Arizona. He had 108 targets in his sophomore season, 68 receptions. And 2021, it was 103 targets, 77 receptions. Hasn't broke 1,000 yards or didn't break 1,000 yards with Arizona. He did his first year in Jacksonville. But he's just an okay wide receiver. And this is my biasness. We're talking about Christian Kirk coming to Washington because Kliff Kingsbury knows him,
Yeah,
and likes him, played with him, and everything like that. Here's my biasness coming off, but I will say that a lot of people say Washington needs a guy outside that can take the top off. And there was a guy who I'm very familiar with, Boomer Sooner, that can take the top off of a defense.
Oh Lord,
who is still somewhat young.
He is young,
but Hollywood Brown could be the guy to take the top off a defense. I'm just saying. I agree. Christian Kirk's likely the one to come because of the connection with Kliff Kingsbury. Because he's young enough, he could take a prove it deal. 1 or 2 years here in Washington, show that he still has what it takes to get a then bigger contract. But I'm just saying Hollywood Brown can be a special wide receiver. Just going to put that out there.
Yeah, I'm not a Hollywood Brown guy either.
Has he played a full season his NFL career at all? Or more than 10 games? Has he?
He has played more than 10 games, 5 or 6 of the 7 seasons that he's been here. He has time in Arizona in 2022 with Kliff Kingsbury as well.
What were his stats that year?
His stats that year, his 2 years in Arizona, he played started 10 games first year, started 14 the second year, 67 receptions, 709 yards, 51 receptions, 574. Different situation, obviously, as they had a young Kyler Murray, not a Jayden Daniels.
No, I'm good on one piece, bro.
Well, I mean, Christian Kirk had everyone wants to talk about his inabilities in Jacksonville. One of his years in Jacksonville is better than anything Hollywood Brown has done in his career. I mean, he had a bomb year in Jacksonville 1 year.
He did. His big year in Jacksonville in 2022, 84 receptions for 1,108 yards. That's a Terry McLaurin type season.
Touchdowns.
I think you got to get 2 more wide receivers. I think you got to get another slot receiver to battle it out with Luke McCaffrey for that wide receiver 4 spot, and then go get you a bigger wide receiver on the outside. Go get you a Devontae Adams or a Keenan Allen. Go get you those guys. Devontae, despite Aaron Rodgers' bad year, he had less than 100 catches for over 1,000 yards. I think like 8 touchdowns. I know he wants to probably go play with Aaron Rodgers, but you got to get you a veteran receiver like that. Go get Amari Cooper. Go get Amari Cooper. Why not? You need just we need some height on the wide receiver position. We really do.
That's what I'm talking about. Build through the draft. Amari Cooper.
No, dude.
I do agree with JG here. Height is nice to have. It would always Washington as a famous trio of wide receivers that were not exactly that tall. It is nice to have when you have a big bodied wide receiver who can high point the ball and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. Understand what you're saying. But as JG mentioning here, it's not a requirement. Getting open is the requirement. To me, I'm a route runner guy. I'm always looking for the guy who can run routes because that's the guy I want. Because you might not be the tallest guy. You might be 6 foot and I could tower over you. But it doesn't matter if I can't catch you. It can't matter if you run a great route and all of a sudden you created NFL open space, 2-3 yards, a yard of separation. That to me is way more important. The problem is route running isn't necessarily the key. That's not the shiny thing. The shiny thing is speed. The shiny thing is size.
Keenan can route run. Keenan's a surgeon with this.
Keenan can route run. Absolutely.
He's also
isn't he like 32, 33 at this point? But you're right. You have to put somebody in there. And you're probably not going to draft him. So you have to put somebody in there. One of these guys that you've said, one of these guys that came from Nathan's lips in today's show is going to be a Washington Commander in training camp.
Yes.
Or more than one, probably 2 of them. At least. They're going to be because they have to. They have to fill those holes. And maybe it's Noah or Diami. I don't think it's Diami. Diami's going to get paid. Sorry. And they're not going to pay what Diami's going to get on the open market.
No.
It could be a Noah. Too. It could be Oz. It could be Crowder.
They can go too. All 3 of them can go.
Yeah, but you never know.
need a whole new wide receiver room this year, man.
We do. One more note for Hollywood Brown here. Just pointing out that Arizona, under Kliff Kingsbury, did trade for Marquise Brown and did not choose to sign Christian Kirk. Just pointing that out as we're talking about familiarity. So Kliff Kingsbury likes,
right?
He did not sign Christian Kirk, but he did go out and trade for Hollywood Brown. Just putting that out there as options when we sit there and we talk about what that is. Now, one of the questions we had earlier was kind of who do we go, with opposite Terry McLaurin and Deebo. Stoner, for Gregory here, he doesn't like DK Metcalf. Calls him a ball baby. Says we don't want him.
Yes,
I'm going to allow you, as the resident DK Metcalf fan club member of Ref the District, to expand why DK Metcalf would be a good signing for us before we move on.
Are you kidding me right now?
DK is everything that this team would want, other than what he's going to demand in a contract extension.
Yeah.
Right? He's going to get Terry money or better. So he's going to get $30 million a year or more. So that's not necessarily what you want to do at this point. But the kind of player that DK Metcalf is, he is that tall runner who runs routes and can get over the top. He does everything.
He's a freak.
DK Metcalf is a top 10 wide receiver in this league. And to say you wouldn't want that guy in the prime of his career that stays healthy just because, and I don't know where this reputation comes from, that he's a ball baby.
I would be too.
Haven't heard that about DK Metcalf.
I mean, I would be too if I was playing with the quarterbacks he's been playing with.
Right. But I mean, he's everything. He's everything that you want in a wide receiver.
Yeah, man.
He is. I mean, I think he's right there with AJ Brown in that type of receiver. Big, physical, fast, hungry, dog mentality, blocks. Yes. Contested catches.
Does block, which is nice.
He does it all. There are no downsides to him in terms of his play. Right. There are downsides to his contract.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing, because he's going to get a ton of money wherever he goes and decides to extend with. But that's exactly the kind of receiver that Washington needs in Washington that they're not going to get.
I just imagine Stoner has a picture of DK Metcalf, one of the ones that shows like his abs, right? And it's it's like posted on the ceiling before he goes to bed, or he's like the Wolverine meme where it's the picture and the picture is DK Metcalf. I just feel like that's Stoner. He's always been a big DK Metcalf fan. Let me give you, probably not going to come here, especially Washington. If Deebo Samuel pans out, do you really need 3 wide receivers making 60+ million? Because Terry McLaurin is likely getting extended as well.
Yeah. I mean, what's not to like about DK? His worst season was his rookie year when he had 100 targets, 58 catches for 900 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's his worst year. And that was his first year in the league. Just last year, when people were kind of down on him, he had 66 for 992 yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, the guy
Jayden would get him double-digit touchdowns. So
that's what Geno Smith, right?
I know.
Think what Jayden would do with it.
Sam Howell was throwing some of those balls last year.
Yeah. I mean, the year before, he also had 66, but over 1,100 yards. I mean, he's had 12. He's had double-digit touchdown years twice.
Yeah,
he's been over 1,000 yards 3 times, and his worst receiving was 900 yards, and that was his rookie year. So, and that was the same.
Just last year, we had to keep Terry in a blowout game just to get him 1,000 yards for the season.
Yeah, exactly. So, you asked me to make my point for DK Metcalf. Those are my points.
There you go.
You would want
resident fan club member here, the Stoner.
I know he's only 27, by the way, and he just turned 27.
Yeah.
So he's basically
going to get good money. He's going to get good money, probably not here in Washington. Now, last thing to talk about on free agency, guys, before we move on to the combine here. Coach Jay Gruden had posted out the Commanders players to watch, that his top 5 that he thinks are going to take a big leap next year. And I wanted to bring it up because I think that's part of when it comes to free agency is this coaching staff is familiar with. Adam Peters is familiar with the guys that are in the building, and they have expectations for some of these guys to make that big leap. Maybe they didn't live up to expectations this year, but maybe with that extra year, they do it. So I'm going to read off the list here, but I'm also wanting to know from you guys, how important is that expectation when it comes to free agents? Do they go after another defensive tackle if they think Johnny Newton is going to make that leap this year? That's the question I have as we go over this list. Number 5 on the list, Luke McCaffrey. Luke, everybody's favorite wide receiver last year that didn't actually do anything. The new Cam Sims. Is he going to make that leap this year? Jay Gruden thinks so. Johnny Newton, just mentioned him, very high on him for me. I think that guy is going to be a baller for Washington. Ben Sinnott, Trev, you had mentioned Sinnott, the Senator, not doing much this last year. Tight end, as we talked with Logan Paulson, a difficult position to translate into the NFL. Will year 2 be the year that he comes out? Marshawn Lattimore. Making an appearance as number 2 on Jay Gruden's list for players to watch and improve. Somebody who didn't really get a chance and was kind of abused during his time in Washington, maybe the offseason, maybe a full offseason with Joe Witt Jr. and company helps. And then, of course, Jayden Daniels, number 1 on that list. If Jayden Daniels makes a giant leap or a big leap, as Jay Gruden says here, I don't care who numbers 2 through 5 are, because you're probably going to have another successful season if he makes a big leap at QB. But what do you guys think about Jay Gruden's list here, and how does that play into free agency when it comes to picking players? How much are those expectations set for the players that you've coached and drafted go into free agency?
I still think they'll be aggressive at those positions outside of quarterback. I think they still like what we have, but I still think that they're not quite ready or quite sold for them just to stick with them and not have to worry about that position when it comes to like a starting role. But I think they will still continue to be aggressive with those positions, but still have them in a developmental role. So does that make sense?
Do you think when he talks about Luke McCaffrey making that big step, right? Does that mean they're done essentially at wide receiver? Because that would mean he would have to be basically wide receiver 3 in terms of targets. I don't necessarily mean in terms of the share that he gets of the offense. If he has to step up, then he's basically wide receiver 3 then.
I think he battles a free agent wide receiver that we bring in for that wide receiver 3/4 spot, because it looks like they probably like him as a returner too. So if you're going to be a kick returner and you don't want to put Austin Eckler back there, who, no offense, he was good at it, but it's hurting him. 2 concussions in 1 season. You don't want to overload him. Then whoever they bring in, like a Hollywood Brown, no offense, Nathan, or a Tyler Boyd, or one of those receivers that Luke can duke it out with to get that wide receiver 3/4 spot. But they do like him enough to, at least for the return game, and for him to at least be at the 4 or 5 wide receiver spot.
You know how last year where all we talked about was the key to the entire season, of course, was Jayden Daniels and his ability to develop as a quarterback. We almost didn't care too much about wins and losses as long as we were able to see that Jayden Daniels was the quarterback of the future and you can build around him. Well, this year, I think that sort of that pressure, if you will, and Lockdown brought it up there that Nathan, you put up there earlier, is Brandon Coleman. He's the key to this entire off season. He's a guy that has to make that step up. And I'm surprised that Jay Gruden didn't have him on his list, because is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Is he even ready to be either one?
Right.
Because Jayden Daniels masked his inability to be a solid left tackle. I mean, he didn't even start the year, right? Cornelius Lucas was the guy.
They had that weird
Trent Scott was in
tackle thing that they had going on where they just kept rotation is the word I was looking for, Trev.
So is he a left tackle? Is he a left guard? Is he a right tackle?
Yeah.
What are you going to do in terms of how do you approach free agency in the draft based on Brandon Coleman? He's the biggest key to this entire offseason.
Yeah.
Because my understanding is they drafted him to be a left tackle.
Yeah.
They want him to be a left tackle.
Yeah.
And he has the attitude for it. He has the work ethic for it. Does he have the
athleticism for it? Yeah.
Right. But does he have the overall talent
right.
to hold down left tackle that as Jayden progresses in years and can't run as much as he could at the beginning of his career, is that guy going to be there to protect his blind side? And if he's not, do you have to move him into guard or can you move him over to the right side? So he's going to be the key on how they approach everything here in free agency. Who do they got to go get? Because you got to have somebody at least temporarily at right guard for Cosme, who's going to miss at minimum 3/4 of the year with his ACL tear.
Right.
Or do you got to go get a left tackle, or do you got to go get a right tackle? How are you going to approach that as you go into free agency? He's the guy that has to step up, and I think he's the key to the entire offseason and, of course, going into next year.
Kept this up here from Tommy because it's short and sweet. My point here as well. Tommy saying what they do in the draft and free agency will tell you how they feel. It's not going to be about what they say. It's about what they do.
Absolutely.
They can say, "Oh, we trust Brandon Coleman as a left tackle," but when they spend a premium draft pick or good money on a tackle, you gotta look at what they do because that will tell you absolutely. Same with Ben Sinnott. That's supposed to be, you drafted him in the second round. You drafted him fairly high. If they go after another tight end, it's not because they want to run a whole lot of tight end 2 sets. It's because Ben Sinnott might not be the guy that they thought he was. I think Luke McCaffrey a little bit, when you're talking a big step for that guy, he was wide receiver 6, maybe 5. A big leap could be, as you guys mentioned, just fighting for that wide receiver 3 position, seeing a little bit more target share. So
usually,
Trev, do you have any? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Trev. Did
you have anything to add to that particular conversation?
No.
Usually, though, when you see a guy or when a guy, usually a guy can either play or he can't play. Sometimes you can just look at it and say, you give all the excuses in the world. He needs to develop. Tight end is a difficult position to transition. If you got a guy who can play, he can play. Mikey Sanistril can play outside, he can play inside, and he was a wide receiver for most of his time in college. He can play, and you just know that from day one. He was the starter inside and then moved outside and was balling out there and finished top 10 in defensive rookie of the year. So sometimes you just have to look at these guys and say, did Brandon Coleman take that left tackle position and grab hold of it, say it's mine, and it's going to be mine for the next 7-8 years? And he didn't do that. I'm not saying he can't develop into that, but sometimes you just got to look at it and say, he didn't stand out at left tackle. He was graded pretty lowly throughout his entire season. Maybe he's just not that guy, and he's got to move into tackle and in the guard, or maybe over to the right side, quite possibly. But I think Tommy T nailed it. You're right. Whatever they do in this offseason is going to dictate where he's going to play. And that's why I think he's the key, though, to the entire offseason plan. The entire free agency plan is all based on where Brandon Coleman is going to play the best.
All right. Well, that's our take here on free agency. Mike had asked, when do we see spreadsheets? To be honest, health hasn't been that great over here, so I haven't gotten to do some spreadsheets, which is unfortunate because if it was going to help out in anything, it was going to help out during the cool down as we talk about those combine warriors Adam Peters giving us all the juice we needed to know who he's going to target in the draft. Coming up here on the Cool Down. Stick with us. Welcome to the Cool Down on episode 215 here of Ref the District. We are moving on not to free agency, but rather talking about the Combine Commanders who shined bright in Indy, because JG, sorry to tell you here, JG asking the question, whatever happened to holding off judging rookies until they've played 3 years? JG, no one's got time for that in this day and age. You're judging them right here from the combine before they even get a chance to play. No, I think that you truly can't draft a player or grade a player until after a few years, JG. But you can look at each season individually. And in this case, for the combine, you can take a look at what they did in the combine. Did they help themselves? Did they hurt themselves? Did they earn that coveted commander label from Adam Peters and Dan Quinn? Because they have their guys that they're going to want with those 3 picks in the first 3 rounds that Stoner kept mentioning during our free agency discussion. Now going to come up here again, because we're going to take a look at some of these guys that maybe stood out. Now, one of the things that is important here, Stoner, that I've talked about a little bit in here is the playbook is kind of open with Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. One of the things that was noted from last and only draft we have with Adam Peters is out of the guys that they drafted, they had conversations with all but one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any conversations that Adam Peters and Dan Quinn interviews that kind of stood out to you as maybe that's a player that Washington is going to go out and get?
Man, so some of the names that were on the list, and these are only reports because there's nothing official that comes out in terms of who met with who, when and where and all that. But what you saw from the reports is, again, you saw a lot of defensive heavy names. The edge guys, you got a picture of Pierce up there. I think they love Pierce. And I think if they can get him after they trade back at 29, which I'm telling you, that's what they're going to do, then I think they'll be really happy with that. But guys like Pierce, the kid from Marshall, who has like the most average name in NFL Combine history, but I can't remember it. Mike Green maybe is his name. I can't even remember. From Marshall, the edge. Guys like that who they met with. And the receiver from Texas, Golden. See,
it is Mike Green, by the way.
Is Mike Green? That is his
Marshall
name?
edge rusher. Yeah, it's Mike.
Yeah. So Golden for Texas, right? He is a guy that took himself from, okay, he's going to be one of the top receivers taken. He may be the top receiver taken because he can fly. He ran a 4.29. And those are guys that they met. And they met, of course, with guys like, I think somebody put it on here earlier, that Ashton Genty. Now, he's not even going to make it out of the top 10, I don't think. But they met with a lot of these guys. Defensive heavy is who they were talking to quite a bit. And you look at their track record, you mentioned it, Nathan, all the draft picks from last year, including the undrafted guys, they met with at the combine, other than Hampton, who they met at the Senior Bowl. So when you keep an eye on those lists, those are probably going to be somebody that they draft.
If they're there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's going to end up in that as far as that's concerned. So the part of that playbook is that they interviewed them, right? Trev. The other playbook, I mean, Adam Peters was asked outright, what do you like? What do you look for in an edge rusher? Yeah. My man gave out a full detailed list. He pretty much just listed off Myles Garrett stat sheet as far as 6'5". This is his arm length. This is his 3 cone. This is it. And so that's part of how the playbook is open. I'm going to get into the relative athletic scores, or RAS as they're known, because Washington drafted a lot of players who had high relative athletic scores, also captains. So Trev, where does that play into the because this is what the combine's all about, is the ability to put the tape's there. Now these players are trying to show like what athletic ability they have. Was there anything that stood out, and how important is it to stand out at the combine athletically that might help people in their draft and in their pursuit to wear the burgundy and gold?
I didn't notice anybody or really pay attention, but I can answer that question. That's where your intangibles come in. That's where the stuff you don't necessarily get to see on tape, you can see the combine drill, that translates to what you see on tape. Like, for instance, the quick change of direction, the shuttle drill, the cone drill. They're not doing that in the game, but those drills definitely help what you can do to be successful in the game. So the combine, I think, is for that. I mean, yeah, the vertical's cool, the 40-yard dash, this and that, but all those other drills that aren't as sexy, that's my word of the day-to-day, as the other drills, that's where you get your intangibles. That's where you see how athletic they truly are. Yeah, everybody can run fast and jump high. It's NFL. It's college football. But can you turn quick? Can you turn the dime? Can you get off the break fast? Can you get your head around fast and make a quick decision with it's just those kind of intangibles really you get to see in the combine that you don't get to see necessarily on the tape.
I like watching. I do like watching that 3-cone drill, right? That little shuttle deal. But we talked about this last week, in that Washington drafted 3 of the top 22 guys from last year's combine. Like Luke McCaffrey was number 1. Of every player who was at the combine in 2024, Luke McCaffrey had the best one. And I believe Sinnott had like the 3rd, or am I getting that? And Dominic Hampton had like 22, or maybe Hampton.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, are you talking position there? Because I don't remember Sinnott having the 3rd best overall.
No, he was in the top 22. He was in the top 22, and I don't remember if he was 22 or 3rd. I'm getting him and Dominic Hampton mixed up, but that's saying something. And they like those athletic guys. They like those guys who, when they do their 40, now they're also doing, maybe they've always done this, but it's being talked about more. They do like the first 10 yards. So who can get off that line quickly.
It's much more popular now. Yeah.
Yeah. So they look at all that stuff. And as Dan Quinn said, when he was at the combine, he says he likes to sit down with these guys and he likes to hear their story and learn what it is that motivates them. And when he hears certain guys, then he says, okay, this is the kind of guy that's going to do well in my locker room. This is the kind of guy who's going to compete and who's going to fight every day. Mikey Sanistro he wasn't super fast. No. His 40 was, I think he ran like a 4.49, which is great, but it's not, relatively speaking, it's not super fast, right? He didn't have the best of any of those sort of what Trev was saying, the sexy, sexy times or whatever, right? But he sat down and he talked to Mikey Sanistro and he said, this is the guy. This is the kind of guy I want on my team. A guy who's going to fight. He's only 5'10", 5'9", or 5'10", but I want him to play cornerback for my team because I know he's going to fight every time. So that's what they look for, and that's what some of these guys that they're talking to, they're very strategic about who they talk to. They don't just go around and just start pulling guys into a meeting room. They're looking at what they're doing in these drills and what they did at Senior Bowl and things like that, and they're going to find the guys that they know meet their culture and meet their attitude and who are athletic. That's who they're going to meet with, and that's who they're going to end up drafting as well.
Yeah, I think things like the Senior Bowl are important because it's not about the play on the field during the Senior Bowl. It's about that week of practice. It's about how they take coaching at the NFL level. It's how they take the challenge, because they're no longer playing against, randoms. They're playing against the best of the players who are potential NFL talents. So that's the part that's good there. And then at the combine, it's the parts we don't see. A lot of the stuff is put on the show now for us as viewers and consuming that and those stats and seeing that kind of stuff. But the big part for Adam Peters is, like you mentioned, Stoner, is that behind the scenes stuff, the stuff we don't see until it comes out on tape later during a Hard Knocks episode, as it did with Jayden Daniels, or some of the behind the scenes stuff that maybe the team will push out on how much they liked a particular player. But that's honestly where a lot of that money's made. So that's why we brought up the interviews first. But the relative athletic scores is something I can't get away from, because it is amazing. One, that's where that potential is. A lot of the times you're drafting for potential. So just because a player has shown good stats doesn't, and good tape, but you have a guy who didn't show as good of tape, but is more athletic. You take the guy who's more athletic because you think that you can coach that good tape into that player. And I think there's an old saying, or, kind of a story that goes with this, is if you're going up for the Olympics and you have two guys who run the 100-meter at the same time, but you have one guy who has perfect form and a guy who doesn't have perfect form, you take the guy who doesn't have perfect form to the Olympics because you think that you can coach perfect form into him and improve that time. Because the guy who ran perfect the first time and had that score, that's probably his peak, right?
Yeah, there's no room for improvement.
There's no room for improvement. So you take the guy who has that potential. So I think that's where you see a lot of this, because, I might win on technique over a guy, but if a guy is a fraction of a second faster than me, I need to be perfect every single time on technique. He just has to be perfect once on beating me off the jump, right? So I think there's some things there, and there's some of the top RAS scores that I'll be looking into, and that bothers me that I said RAS score, because the S does stand for score already. But there's some RAS results that I'll be digging into and looking. Some of the top players don't score very well. Some of the guys who you're going to see drafted fairly high don't really score, because not all teams do favor something like the RAS results here. Where do you guys kind of value that? I know I am the analytic guy. I'm going to be the one breaking down spreadsheets. I'm going to be the one looking at those 3-cone stats and all this and kind of labeling out that. Where do you guys fit when it comes to looking at and drafting a potential player for the Commanders?
What do I look at for that? I don't look at I have to be honest, I'm not a stats guy like my fellow compadres here on this. I look at tape, I look at interviews, character, and then once we select them, then I go look at the other stats and stuff to see what he's all about and reasons why. But prime example, didn't Jamin Davis have a good RAS score?
Oh yeah, he was a very athletic guy,
and he's about to be on his fourth team in 4 years, and a captain.
RAS result.
Yeah, so like I hear those are important. Some do pan out, like Mikey Sanistrill and the players we have this year. But for me, when it comes for drafting, it's just game tape, character, interview, what they do off the field.
You and Angela sharing that there, Trev.
Yeah, because I'm not a big stats person. Yeah. Because like you said, I know stats don't lie, but also sometimes they do tell a little white lie. Jamin Davis, for example, great stats. It's like, okay, now we see why we select him second round. But then you watch the game tape and watch him play, it's like, why did we take him second round? And now he's looking for his fourth team. So, to be honest, tape, character, intangibles, and then stats after we make the selection.
Yeah, I'm like that. I'm old school. I'm not. I am
sniff test.
Yeah, sniff test.
Stoner sniff test.
Yeah. I'm all about that. I watch the guy play. I don't necessarily. If they didn't have a combine, I think I would be a better judge of talent than most, because that combine does create different narratives for guys.
Sure.
Exactly.
Right. And moves them up boards when they shouldn't.
Yeah.
When I watched John Ross.
Oh yeah, dude.
Football,
I was like, yo, he about to set the league on fire.
Right. But the thing, not for me though, I watched him in college a little bit and I said, this doesn't translate real well unless there's nobody on one side of the field and he's all alone on the other side of the field. But then he goes to the combine and runs the fastest combine score in history. And then he's a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, then you're like, wow, how did that happen? And then it doesn't work out. But if he hadn't gotten to the combine, then he would have probably been a 4th or 5th round pick because you watched him. You watched the tape. You watched him play. And so sometimes that RAS result can certainly put a different label on a guy that either good or bad, and then you've totally screwed up that particular draft pick.
Troy Apke.
Yeah, there you go. Apke season.
I missed that guy.
4th round pick. Guy had very nice athletics.
Was he a 4th rounder?
Yeah.
I don't remember him being a 4th rounder, but man,
Yeah.
just because he ran fast at the combine, and Deion Sanders was in love with the dude.
Yeah,
because he ran so fast.
We had to take him.
Yeah. So and that's a great example. Troy Apke had no business being drafted that high.
I'm the analytics guy. I'm going to look at stats a lot. I'm going to look at the RAS results. I'm going to look at college stats breakdown first, and that's where I'll start to kind of find some of those. Now, that's not to say that when I'm watching tape, when I'm watching a game or whatnot, that I don't find players that pop off the screen that then I follow and then I use RAS results and other things to then be justifying it, right? So it's kind of a mix for me, but I definitely am more of the analytical side, largely just because there's so much out there. And when you're talking about needing to watch tape, and this is why when you're talking about a scouting department, it's not just 3 dudes. The department's 25 or more. And then you're talking about those are probably department heads, and you got even more people out there because they have to look at hundreds of people. And so when you're watching a game, a college football game, you have to then, if you want to actually watch one player, you got to get the all 22 for that. And then you got to watch that player for all snaps that they've done, 50 offense, 50 defense or whatnot. Now, if you want to watch another guy from that same game, you're going to have to get the all 22 for that guy. You're going to have to go through and do that. So it's a lot. So it's just why I like the analytics side, because it kind of hones down of like, who are the players who's standing out, not just on box score stats, which can be misleading. Because why do I want a cornerback that has got, leads the league in tackles? That's an awful stat for a cornerback, right? Like it's not where you want you want him tackling. You want him knocking the ball down, right? You don't want to see that kind of stuff. So also when it's talking about tackles, a linebacker who leads in tackles, you're like, oh yeah, we got a thumper. Well, where are those tackles happening? Because if those tackles are happening 7 yards off the ball, off the line of scrimmage, that's a bad linebacker, right? You want a linebacker who's tackling closer to the line of scrimmage. So to me, I like to look at those kind of stats and move those widgets around to kind of hone in. But I do value looking at tape and I value looking at the game because there are certain players that pop. And there's certain players that you just know are going to be special because of how they show off on tape. And then usually those are the guys that when you look at stuff like their RAS results or some of the advanced analytics, it kind of just helps prove that point. Very rarely, in my opinion, from what I've seen, from what I watch, when I find a guy who I feel pops off the screen, very rarely when I go to the advanced analytics, do I go, oh, I must be seeing something that's not there, because normally that
usually matches up.
Yeah, it matches up pretty nicely. So
and there are some guys also that you do watch. And this is kind of the opposite of what I was saying, that you do watch that pop off a screen and then they never translate to the NFL for whatever reason. And there's one guy in particular, for me anyway, when I went to training camp, and one guy who stood out to me in one of the training camps was Armani Rogers.
Yeah. And
and he was undrafted because he did not have good athletic scores, because he's a big 6'7" quarterback in college.
Yeah.
Right. That dude stood out in camp for me, both in his athleticism and his physicality, and of course his size. I mean, he's the definition of a Jag, and he's on everybody's practice squad and never can get playing time because of injuries and other things. So it just goes both. There's no perfect science to it. Mm-hmm. You just have to have guys who are good at it. But I believe in the Dan Quinn / Adam Peters method, which is you sit down and you talk to a guy and you get a feel for if this guy can play, if this guy wants to be a member of my team, and who's going to compete and fight every day in practice. And I think for me, that's number one overall, is that sort of attitude that the guy has. When Jayden Daniels was in talking with Brian Daboll, right, for the Giants, and they had him do the play up there, and Brian Daboll challenged him and said, what do you see here? I believe is what he asked him, and Jayden Daniels said touchdown. That's the kind of guy I want on my team.
Exactly.
Right? Brian Daboll wasn't looking for him to say touchdown. He was looking for specifics. And Jayden Daniels is like, okay, touchdown. That's what I see here. That's the kind of guys that fit well with Dan Quinn and Adam Peters. And hopefully they'll be able to do that coming up in this draft with their 3.
Oh my gosh.
Premier picks. Is there anybody at the combine who made you think Washington should trade up for?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of those guys.
Jack Sawyer, I like him.
I mean, Abdul Carter. I mean, come on. That dude should be number 1 overall. That guy is going to be a problem, and for somebody. And hopefully
realistically jump up, because going from 29 to top 5 pick is not realistic. But maybe a guy who you feel might be there in the 15 to 18 range.
I don't think that's this draft, Nathan. This is a draft where you can get super quality players even past 29.
Really?
There's a very, very deep draft that there are going to be guys who are drafted in the 30s and 40s that could have been drafted in other drafts in the top 15. This is that kind of draft. So hopefully,
just not for quarterback, which is a good thing. Washington already has it. I do want to, like, people immediately were like, no trade up, nope, trade back.
No, we're not trading.
Don't want us to trade up. I just want to point out that's not what I was advocating. It was merely a question: is if there was a player that you'd want to trade up for, realistically trade up for in the 15 to 18 range. Not advocating that. I am more of a trade back guy. But I wouldn't necessarily go as far as what Stoner's saying and like, oh, you're going to get some premier talent, because it's all a game of chance when it comes to the draft. We're going to be covering the draft as it gets closer to make sure that you keep up to date with it. Make sure you hit that like button here for this video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel as we produce content weekly for you. And we are live every Wednesday here on YouTube and Facebook at 7:30 Eastern. There's a full house today. I'm back into the regular rotation here as we're in March for our Washington Commanders content. We have some probably membership stuff coming up later as well. We appreciate you jumping in here today in the comment section. Angela, Uptown Dre, JG, Locked On Law, Jersey in the house as well. Plenty of others who were there. Scooby went dead. Not early, late for him across the pond or there. We appreciate you in the chat. Make sure if you're watching this on review, make sure you leave us a comment there as well. If you're listening to this on your favorite audio platform, leave us a 5-star rating as well. We are a part of the Believe Network, brought to you by Bet Online. And until next time,
build through the draft. I need to see it. I haven't seen it.
Be a fan.